Entry 20, last night was strange indeed. I know I keep saying this, but it was, and what follows, or should I say, was added to it makes it a little creepy too. I did not write this entry down straight away, for I thought that it was not relevant to the heretofore accounts. However, I have now added it, for I have decided that although it is not an astral experience, as such I suppose it is connected in that it is spiritual. So, let me begin again. Last night, I had fallen asleep in my kiosk, and I awoke to see a figure of a soldier standing in front of me. The soldier, of course, was a ghost, and he was almost transparent. However, he was visible, and as you could imagine, I was somewhat taken aback by the experience. What made it even stranger was that when I awoke to see this vision right in front of my eyes, I had had my eyes shut. Yes, my eyes were firmly shut, for when I noticed the apparition, I jumped, and it was then that I opened my eyes. When my eyes opened, the ghost had vanished. Now, earlier that evening I had the strange sensation that I was being stalked or watched. On several occasions that evening, I was so jumpy, and this was before the event that I have just written. I was so jumpy that I had to go and do a thorough check of the park, because of the bad feeling that I eventually wrote off as paranoia. Then, as I said earlier, the next part of this tale makes it worthy of this text. When my morning man came to relieve me, I told him of the experience, and although he is a skeptic on the subject of ghosts, he went as white as a newly washed sheet. He told me that this weekend in the Second World War that a whole bunch of soldiers were led to the slaughter. When I described the uniform that the soldier was wearing, this made him even shakier. I am sure that that old skeptic changed his view, and although he did not say that he did mention that it was somewhat uncanny. He told me that in the Second World War that some Commonwealth soldiers had stayed at this hotel. He said that the attire that I had described was the attire that they would have been wearing. He said that they had planned a top-secret strategic shore invasion at this very weekend, and the weather was fine, and their battle plan went ahead as planned. However, when they arrived at their adversary's shore, the tide was out, and although it was lambs to the slaughter, they went ahead with their plan anyway, and all the soldiers were completely massacred. He said that it was today that the massacre was commemorated. Therefore, I decided to write down this account in this journal for the experience that I had, and as a sign of respect for all those poor soldiers that died in vain and are probably still trying to fathom out what had happened to them, or their whereabouts even to this day. Another few thoughts just came to mind just as I was about to end this entry, so I have prolonged it to try to figure out my investigation. Was I talking to the ghost in my spirit state, totally unaware or unconscious of the conversation until its end, and then gained lucidity, or the center of my awareness as I slipped back into my physical body? Alternatively, did the ghost become aware of my spirit body and was mesmerized by the event as it was just about to disengage from my physical body to walk on the astral planes? I mean, when sleepwalkers walk, they can carry out quite complex tasks, from opening cupboards to even crossing roads. So could this be the same for spiritual somnambulism, should it not? I know that I was seeing the ghost with my spirit vision, which was made obvious when I opened my physical eyes to see him vanish. He did not vanish, he was just not visible to me with my physical vision. I now wonder if people that have deathbed visions, or mediums that can see ghosts, are somehow using both their spirit vision and their physical vision simultaneously. I mean, for those who are just about to cross over into the light, it would make sense to have spirit vision. Just as I was able to see in my spirit state, when I was either getting ready to dislodge, or if I was on my way back, they are just about to vacate their physical state altogether. So, then it would make sense if they could see with their spirit vision too. In addition, when I have awoken in my astral body, I do not have trouble seeing other astral projectors too. If mediums were somehow able to see simultaneously with their physical and with their spirit vision, then this would make sense that they could see ghosts too. For a ghost is nothing other than a spiritual sleepwalker in their spirit body, this time not just unaware that they were out and about, but unaware that they had died and had no physical body to return to. Further, I have read in my research through the bookstores that experiments have been carried out where mediums had been at the bedside of people about to die. The mediums and the dying people had both witnessed the same visions, so therefore they collectively objectified that deathbed visions do occur. I suppose I will never really know the answer to those questions of was I ending the conversation with the ghost, or was I shocked awake by the ghost as my spirit body that was getting ready to walk or return mesmerized it. Unless I see the ghost again, here or in the light, or unless I go under some form of hypnosis, that mystery will remain unsolved. The answer to my other thought, as I have said, it only makes sense that mediums and people about to make the journey to the light are seeing with their spiritual and physical eyes simultaneously. Further, if this is the case, and it seems self-evident that it is, this means that psychics are not people in a super-spiritual state. They have somehow mastered physically to do what we all do every night when we walk spiritually on the plains. Alternatively, they have acquired their spirit senses at an early age, perhaps a glitch in their genetic programming, or perhaps a seer's gift from some kind of spiritual overlord. Entry 21. Tonight I found myself racing to reach my body before a spirit possessed it. I awoke in a sheer state of panic and terror. I knew instinctively that the race was on. It was my blind terror and desperation that awoke me. Now, it was nothing to do with the ghost of the soldier from the previous night. For I did not feel any paranoia or discomfort at all tonight before I dozed off in my physical body. I think that they have either somehow made their peace, or crossed over, or that they will make their presence known next year, on their fatal anniversary. Anyway, as I said, I awoke out of my body when I became aware that I was racing a dark figure back through the park to my physical body, and I tell you it was most disturbing. Of course, I beat it, but I felt a little shaky deep into the night. I decided not to go back to sleep in case I had a reoccurrence and lost the race for my physical body the next time. I have no idea if the dark presence was a ghost after my body, or if it was an astral traveler having fun or mocking me, seeing that I was out and unaware. The ghost or traveler, however, did appear somewhat sinister, and I am sure that its intent was the worst that I could imagine. I mean, I am not quite sure what would have happened if I had lost the race. I did know on a deeper level that it somehow was in pursuit to beat me to my physical body, and was up to no good though. It was a traumatic experience, for as I say, I was out of my body, and I was not aware of it. Therefore, whoever walks in my spirit when I am unconscious, or if I am sleepwalking and or dreaming in my spiritual state, the presence of the dark ethereal being and its intent, or that other self-awareness of the dark entity and its intent awoke me from my slumber or unconsciousness when it got me to race to repossess my physical body before it was too late. The experience had me thinking, what would have happened if I had lost that race? Would I have been severed from my physical body forever? I mean, it could have been an entity or bad spirit from another world that had found the entrance into our world. It could have played havoc with my life, and the least it could have done was make me lose my job by leaving my post unattended. Alternatively, it could be the bad spirit of a deceased killer from our world that had had capital punishment, and it might have wanted to borrow my vessel to get revenge on the jury, judge, and his prosecuting victims. Imagine that in the courtroom. It was not I. Somebody possessed my body to seek personal wrath. even if it was not forever, the dark being could have got up to all sorts of tricks or trouble. Then afterwards left like a thief in the night, or crawled back to whatever rock or lower dimension that it crawled out from, leaving me with the consequences of its evil actions. Alternatively, I could have been stuck with a squatter forever, fighting for my turn to have control of my actions and/or consciousness. If it had come to that, I might have been committed or sentenced and placed into a mental institution and declared by a head doctor as clinically insane, a multiple personality. If the dark entity had psychotic or psychopathic tendencies and was not out to seek revenge, say it just felt like doing it for some kind of twisted pleasure, with no motive at all, and did not give one single iota of anyone else's pain, grief and suffering that its pleasure would create, I could be detained indefinitely, even if it left sometime in the near future. I mean, if that did occur, who would believe my tale? I tell you in all honesty, if it did not happen to me and I heard of that kind of tale, or if I was a judge, or one of the jury, I would have trouble believing it. I would probably say off with his head, or throw away the key, or whatever. However, it did not happen, and I am glad I won the race. I tell you one thing, I have never been so happy to be the sole owner of this, my body. Tomorrow, I am going to go down to the bookstores again, and see if I can find any books on this particular subject. Entry 22. Today I found what I was looking for in the bookstore, and as I presupposed, it was in the section on mind, body and spirit, and it was called Possession. Apparently, it is quite common that dead beings find themselves trapped, or in my case drawn to another being's physical body. Apparently, they do not have to be a bad soul, they are probably lost and in a confused state. The literature went on to say that they could be drawn to someone else's body as an act of desperation in trying to escape their present turmoil. Alternatively, they could be attracted to the vessel by the living person's aura, as a moth is drawn to a candle or a light in the night sky. With the moth, it thinks that the light in the night sky is the moon and it gets confused. With the discarnate lost soul, who really knows? I am sure not even they know the reason. However, they get attracted like the moth, or using another analogy, like iron filings to a magnet, and once they gain entry, it can be very difficult to get them to vacate. However, with enough time and effort, one can exorcise them or get them to leave. Some of them are enveloped in a mist or cloud and they cannot see anything at all. As soon as one helps them to clarify their true situation, they somehow reacquire the use of their true perception. It is then that they often see a deceased loved one that then helps them to let go of their physical restraints, which in turn helps them with their crossing into the light. The above, however, is what happens to the lost and confused souls that do not know they are dead, or for one reason or another they find it difficult to let go of their previous physical incarnation and move on up into the light. However, there are discarnate spirits that, for reasons only known to themselves, know that they are physically dead and do not care less about whose body they possess and what they do with it. Therefore, it is then that all my fears of the previous evening could manifest after all. Before I came to this car park, or I had these experiences, I was just your ordinary male living quite happily in his one ordinary world. Then, within the space of 3 or 4 months, I am reduced to a complete nervous wreck living in a multidimensional world. Not only that, but I am apparently surrounded by an infinite supply of astral beings that are conscious or unconscious, and discarnate spirits, good and lost, or temperamental and evil, all subjecting me to despair, anxiety and confusion. Yes, I find that I am surrounded by just plain selfish or psychopathic discarnate beings, as they go about their business of either tormenting my spirit in the astral planes, shocking me awake in the process, and or racing me back to my physical body before they steal it from me right behind my very nose. Why? One might ask. Because they are in a confused and lost state, and they cannot get it into their thick ethereal heads that they are in the afterlife, and that it is their time to cross over or move on. Or they consciously steal it from me because they want to seek revenge on some poor unsuspecting past lover, mother, or some other god-forsaken spirit. Or they just plain did not want to give up smoking cigarettes. I mean, it might become fashionable for, say, incubuses to give up raping physical beings with their ethereal bodies and start body hopping and raping females, and even males with our physical bodies. Imagine 2 minutes after the orgasm trying to explain to the female and or male that you were both the victims of an incubus. Imagine just how that would stand up in the courtroom. Honest, I was the joint victim in this unfortunate crime and incident. I think that if I do not find some kind of negative spiritual entity repellent, that I am going to have to give up falling asleep on a full-time basis. I suppose that I could go to the doctor and say, "Hello doctor, could you give me some drugs to help me with insomnia? Why, John, are you having trouble sleeping?" He would probably ask, "No, doc. I do not want sleeping pills, I want the complete opposite. I wish to remain awake indefinitely." I would retort, "Why would you not want to sleep, John? Is something bothering you and giving you nightmares?" He would probably ask, "I suppose you could call it that. Only that my fears are not repressive elements of long-forgotten childhood traumas. Traumas trying to let me know that it is about time that I relived and faced up to past events and integrate them with my present understanding. In fact, the fears that I have are not symbolic dream material at all, manifesting as dream people, places, situations and events. However, I am sure that if I did happen to drop off to sleep that I would have nightmares, but they would be dream material more in the way of daily residue and repressions from very real and present-day waking fears. I might add, actually, I think that if you want to get to the root of your problem, you should go and pay a visit to a respectable and well-established psychologist, not I, your local GP. The doctor would probably try to conclude before setting me up with a head doctor. To which I would explain, I do not think that a psychologist can help me with my problem. Perhaps a parapsychologist could alleviate or help me with my torment. I could give you some tablets to help you with your stressful situation, but it would only be like brushing away the snow off of your doorstep in a full-on blizzard. It would help you, but unfortunately only for a while, for it would only repress the symptoms and not deal with the root of the pain, John. He would almost certainly say, oblivious to the use of the word para before psychologist. Well, doc, what would you say and think if I told you that my worries, stresses and fears are paranormal in nature? I would most likely clarify. To that, he would ask, could you elucidate? To that I would probably at last spill the beans and tell him of all the heretofore events and circumstances leading up to my stress. To which I am certain, he would most definitely tell me to quit my job, and if the symptoms persisted, he would most surely refer me to a head doctor, who in turn would have me change my present address to a state institution, so as they could keep a watchful eye on my psychological state of mind or situation. Therefore, I think a trip to the doctor is totally out of the question. All that I can do is carry on as I have been doing, and if or when any of my innate fears manifest into fruition. 1. I either learn to adjust and cope with my new troublesome friend. 2. I bore the spirit to a fate worse than death and or possession, when or if I ever gain any kind of control, so that it leaves my vessel to go ruin some other unsuspecting physical being's life. 3. I chase it out by constant bickering and nagging like a back-seat driver on a busy and confusing motorway. Or 4. I commit euthanasia, and follow it all the way to hell and back, never giving it from that day on a single second of peace, or rest throughout all eternity. On a more serious note, the books go on to say that if one does happen to find that a discarnate spirit possesses one must know that essentially no one, and I mean no one, is essentially bad. I mean, in life you do get some really hateful and hurtful people, but the root to their abhorrent behavior is usually negative conditioning. You can have bad genes that one has inherited that can leave the mind twisted or socially mutated. This is also true. However, on a fundamental level, all living things seem to have one thing in common, and that is that they all avoid pain and suffering and have a tendency to steer toward happiness and pleasure. Now, us people who happen to be at the top of the food chain on this particular planet are so because our evolution gave us some very useful attributes, and one of those attributes are our innate social skills. Even a natural psychopath that may like to inflict pain on others for its perverse selfish pleasure is under the same social spell. Yes, every single one of us loves the right company. All we need is the correct set and setting to go with it. In life, in the physical world, you get upset people between and amongst clans and tribes. You get irrational statements and lifestyles that are negative because they happen to be born and raised on the wrong side of town. At the end of the day, it does not matter if we are male or female, black, brown, yellow or red, or even rich or poor. If the parents are no good and all they did was push their frustrations into their growing siblings, they were stunting and maiming them instead of nurturing and comforting them, the end result would naturally be that you would end up with a mixed-up child and eventually an upset and suffering adult. However, once one is responsible for one's own life, one is able to push aside any residue of one's misplaced or abusive childhood and recondition one's life to whatever one wants. Yes, one should be able to fit in socially. For example, if we are creatures of habit and conditioning, then it is up to you to stop mopping or blaming your inefficient, useless, and idle life on an ill-gotten past. Then, let go and live in the present and change your environment, and eventually the new set and settings will create new positive habits that are in par with that environment. It is how one sees oneself and how one applies that self to the world that helps one achieve one's goals and ambitions in life. If one were given one wish, one would, if one used it in a wise manner, use it to improve one's lifestyle, and as I said above, the natural order of living things is to choose happiness and pleasure over suffering and pain. Even psychopaths avoid being caught or detected by the authorities, so not even they, no matter how twisted, do not want a life of pain and suffering. So it is then that just as in life we all want those attributes that enhance, improve and enlighten our lives, so it is then that even discarnate spirits, if given the choice, would choose happiness and pleasure. So all one has to do when one sees a ghost, or if a discarnate spirit is possessing one, is to reason with that ghost that it no longer belongs in the physical world, and that it is keeping itself back from a spiritual happiness and pleasure that is rightfully his or hers for the taking. It may take its time to become lucid, so it will take time, patience and endurance, but eventually the ghost will see sense, for it is in its nature. You can tell the lost soul to call out with its mind to a departed loved one as if they were in the next room, that they must feel and express emotion with their call, and that eventually that loved one, or a spiritual guide or helper, will come to their aid. If one finds it impossible to communicate with the offending entity, then take a trip to a local respected medium or spiritual counselor. Check their credentials and their rates of success before you choose one, for they can usually be expensive, or just plain nuts and expensive. If you choose a medium that has a counselor with them, say a husband and wife, or two spiritually gifted sisters, brothers or close friends, this can be and usually is more effective. This is because one usually reaches a state of trance and draws the spirit into them with voluntary possession. Then the other talks some common spiritual sense into the lost soul until it understands and is able to confront the self-evident truth that it is alive spiritually, but physically dead. Once that has been achieved, they usually, as I said above, convince them that they are missing out or holding back from spiritual delights. They, as I said above, they then tell them to reach out with their minds and seek help from a deceased loved one that then helps them or shows them what to do and where to go next. Entry 23. Today I would like to tell you of an experience that I have shared with two people. Now, what makes this rather interesting is that the experiences that we shared were probably at different times. I know that this all sounds very far-fetched, but it is true, for we all had independent accounts of the same place, as if we had all taken a vacation to this place on different weeks. Let me share with you these collective accounts, and you will see what I am trying to put across. The other day, I was having a conversation with my mother on astral travel, and that all of us have these experiences and that most of us either forget we even had them, 2, or are totally oblivious to it. 3, alternatively, if we do recall them, we probably put them down to strange vivid dreams. Next, I went on to tell her of this house, or mansion that I frequently visit in my dreams. She before long began giving me a similar account of an almost carbon copy quality. I mean, it was like she could read my mind, and then to even complicate or simplify the shared experience depending on how you look at it. A friend of mine, who was visiting my mother with me, but up to that point was in the kitchen helping my brother Brian prepare some food and beverages, walked in and overheard our conversation, and she immediately joined in, and to all of our surprise, all our experiences of this place correlated. I mean, it was no collective fantasy. We all had very vivid accounts of very real experiences. You can tell when a person ad-libs or lies, they always reveal themselves in the end. However, you could not only see the reality and the sincerity of the joint conversation, but these people are not the kind of people that lie. As I said, this place was like a grand house, hotel, or even a mansion. It was on the seafront and was very close to the sea. In our physical world, it would have been to close for profit, and that is why I took it to be symbolic and therefore a dream house within a dream. The house had patio doors that looked out over the ocean, and in all practicality, it would suffer damage in the winter months. In the front of the house, there was patio paving, and children often play in a happy and content nature. Now, what made it even stranger is that we all could recall some actual children that were playing there. The reason for this is because some of them that were at play were my mother's grandchildren, and of course, at the same time, they were my nephews and nieces. When I asked my nephews and nieces if they recalled being there, they said that they did not, which in my mind's eye made it even truer, if you get what I mean. If it was a joint hallucination, the children's accounts should have broken the spell, but they did not. As I said, all of us at different times had seen the house and the children at play, and it was an overwhelming joint experience. I know that I have already taken aboard of the fact that the astral planes do exist in an alternate dimension, but up to that point I did not think that that experience was nothing other than a dream. I was using it as a simile, not an actual account of a real-life experience. Entry 24. The other night, on my night off, I was having a party at my home when a friend of mine told me of another correlation that was of a spiritual nature. His name is Anthony. He is so logical and mechanical you could set your watch by him. He works for the train company and has always been fascinated with them even as a child when he used to abscond from school and bunk on them illegally. Anthony is the kind of person that again never lies. He is logical, practical and realistic. However, he is not stupid, and he is often intrigued by spiritual anomalies that I quite often bring to his attention. This time, however, he brought it to my attention, and in all honesty, I was waiting for it. Although I had already had an account of this experience that he brought up in conversation, which I had shared with other people who were present, but sworn to secrecy, I decided to see if he recalled the event and if it had enough influence on his being to tell me of the experience. He was sat in front of me for about an hour in various dialogues when he finally said, "You know that you said that you have been having these astral waking experiences." To which I replied with a smile on my face, "Yes." He went on, "Well, the other day, as I was ready to drift off to sleep, I decided to see if I could bring on such an experience, and if I was successful, I decided I was going to pay you a visit." We both gave our independent individual accounts of the joint experience. The conversations correlated tremendously, even to the point where he remembered surface diving beneath the ground and resurfacing in my car park office next to my chair. He said that he went to sleep, and next thing he knew he was lifting out of his physical body, and that although it was amazing, he did not let himself awake physically and cut his journey short. He said that he was determined to reach his goal. He then remembered walking down his street, heading for my workplace. He entered my park, and then he did that surface dive to surprise me and at the same time shock me. It did both, and on top of that, it showed me that he was conscious. We played together for a little while, then either he drifted off to sleep, or for whatever other reason he disappeared from my park. As I said, I did recall and made an account of the whole event, of which I also shared with people who were present, but I was patiently awaiting his arrival to see if he would bring it up in a conversation, which he did. Entry 25. Today, another friend of mine came to visit me at home, and we had another conversation similar to the one above. His name is Rick, and he said that he performed the act of astral projection and subsequently paid me a visit at my car park. He said, just like Anthony, that he consciously brought on the experience. Then, he lifted out of his body, then exited his flat, and made his way down to my car park to pay me a visit. He was totally conscious all throughout this meaningful act, and it was in no way a dream, for he had not fallen asleep. I did remember his visit, and we had almost identical detailed accounts of the joint experience, all but one single thing. That diversity was that I remembered him standing in front of my face, and that I made a joke about his breath. Now, I was not being cruel, or even sarcastic. It was a joke of spiritual satire, for we were both in our astral bodies, and we both knew that he had no breath as such. Rick's father does not originate here, and his true name is Ricardo. The land from which his father comes from quite often eats spicy foods. Spicy food, although it is very pleasing and palatable for the person who eats the meal, and for those that have the same meal, there is no odor. However, for anyone who has not had that meal, the odor from the breath is very potent. In our physical life, we quite often share a joke on the meal that he has just eaten has entered the room with him. Meaning you could smell his meal from his breath, and that smell was overpowering the whole room. Therefore, the satirical joke made us both crack up with laughter, just like it did in our physical lives. Anyway, the diversity was that he did not remember the joke about the breath, though it was not an adverse memory that was in its place. What he did recall was that he was standing right in front of me blowing up an orange, which he had been bouncing like a basketball since he vacated his flat all the way to my workplace. I cannot account for our subtle differences, but I can suggest that either he or I had slightly mixed our accounts before we truly awoke. For example, we could have got it misconstrued with some dream material. What was interesting, though, was that both accounts were identical, in that he was standing right in front of me and that the joke was to do with breath. As I said, every other detail was perfect. We both had vivid accounts of our astral meetings, and we enjoyed the experiences in both our astral and when we recalled and shared the conversations in our physical world the next day. Entry 26. Today, I had my friend that was at my mother's house pay a visit to my flat, the friend that had been visiting the house on the astral planes with my mother and I, although separately. She was somewhat startled when I told her of a strange experience that I shared with her the other day while we were both out of our physical bodies. The reason why she was quite shocked was because she could not consciously recall our meeting, but that what I told her did correlate with her physical world, as you will see. I remember her sitting on my bed, and we were in the act of conversation. We are strictly platonic, however, we used to live together intimately, but we have since gone our separate ways. Anyway, the conversation was about the washing basket being full to the brim at the end of my bed. She was making a joke at me for not washing it, and it was on the fringes of being a sexist joke like females make from time to time. She asked me if that was a dead body at the bottom of my bed. I replied that it was, and we were both having fun about my apparent male inadequacy, and I suppose her little dig that I could not cope without her mothering. She was sitting slightly to the side of me, and I could see that there was a burn on her right shoulder. I asked her if it hurt, and then I asked her if she wanted me to do some hands-on healing. I rubbed my hands together, getting prepared to attempt to heal the affected area. In my physical life, I quite often perform this act, and it seems to work very effectively. Now, I used to think it was a case of mind over matter, or a touch of faith healing, although not in the dogmatic sense, more in the sense of a friend or whatever, believing that it can be done, and so somehow it works. In the past, I remember performing it on a dog at one time. It was my sister's dog. My sister's name is Alicia. Anyway, we had been on an exceptionally long walk that lasted several days, and the dog went lame. Or it began to limp, to be more precise. Anyway, the dog was unable to place its foot down onto the floor, and we were several miles from my sister's house. So, I performed the hands-on technique, and everyone that was present saw that the dog made a miraculous recovery. From that day on, I had faith in what I could do with my hands-on technique. For that dog, or any dog that I know of, could not have had a clue that I was attempting to heal him. All it would know is that it somehow, and I know it did not even question that. For it does not have that kind of consciousness. That is, unless dog kind are fully rational beings, and just making fun of us people by pretending to be loyal small-minded pets. That somehow it felt better. So it reacted like any other dog, by not thanking me at all and running off to play once more. Anyway, back to the astral tale. I rubbed my hands together, and she refused my help, which was surprising, for along with 4 other people, 5 including myself, she was there that day that I cured the dog. She reached into her bag, which up to that point I had not noticed, or was not aware of it being with her, and pulled out a cream and asked me to apply it, which I did. I then asked her how she had got into my flat, for I did not remember her entry, and I was somewhat puzzled, as she did not own a key, for she had taken what she had wanted and had finally given back the keys a few days before. She was lost in thought, as she thought about her mysterious entry into my flat, knowing also that this was impossible, as she no longer owned a key. Then she disappeared in a puff of logic, without even getting up, which is quite a normal way of travel when one is jolted back into their physical body, as they are shocked awake in their spiritual state. A few days later, when I was telling her of this account, she asked me where the infection on her shoulder was. Now, she was fully clothed and her shoulder was not visible unless I had X-ray vision, which I do not. Anyway, I showed her by pointing to the spot, and she then revealed to me that there was in fact damage to this area, and it was a burn. She said that she had burned herself by overusing the sunbed. We were both surprised by the tale, and that it correlated with the physical world. Entry 27. It has been quite some time since I made my last entry, and I have had many events that are very interesting. However, I do not wish to bore you with all the events, so I have chosen to share with you two of the best. 1. I found myself walking down a road with my friend that I mentioned above, and she had a dog with her. I do not again remember my whereabouts leading up to our rendezvous. All I remember is waking up in my spirit body, as I was overjoyed at seeing my niece Haley, who was with us on the walk. I awoke as I was cuddling her, completely overwhelmed and elated at her being out of her physical body. Then, the next thing that I knew, I found myself waking up in my physical body. I think that I was so happy at seeing my niece that I awoke myself up physically. I checked the time and made a note of it, because I knew that my niece was working in a hotel kitchen and was on the morning shift. It was 10 minutes past 10 in the morning. Later that day, I was paying a visit to my brother's house, and that was where my niece lives, so I told her of the event and our whereabouts. She was thunderstruck by my story, for she loves spiritual conversations. We usually talk about ghosts and whatnot. Although she did not remember our encounter, she said that that morning she went to work at 6 and finished about 8:30. After her shift, she did not go home. She went to a friend's house and went to sleep about 9:15. Further, she said that the location to where we met spiritually is very close to where her friend lives. We both agreed it was a little too close for a coincidence. Then, the other account was my friend Anthony, the one that remembered paying me a visit at my works. I again do not remember leaving my body. I found myself with him as I awoke, this time on the astral planes. I was with him at the top of the hill next to the train station. Now, in the physical world, as I said, he works there, so I think this is the reason he was drawn to it. He had with him, which I thought at the time was somewhat peculiar, his settee. He was trying to keep hold of it and was struggling to do so. I think it was this madcap situation that shocked me awake in my spirit body. He eventually lost the battle, and it went careering down the hill with him chasing after it. I laughed so much that I awoke myself in my physical body. Later that week, I paid him a visit and told him my tale. Although he did not remember our meeting, he said that he has been redecorating his new flat, and that at the moment he was sleeping on his settee.